Next topic is operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is associated with a method of learning that occurs through rewards and punishment for behavior. And we would see that this is coming very close to connectionism, very close to law of effect, because this operates on rewards and punishment. This operates on a word that we call reinforcement. So through operant conditioning, an individual make an association between a particular behavior and a consequence. So just carefully reading this, we can see that operant conditioning is again linked with the stimulus and response, with a particular behavior which is result through a particular stimulus. So it's a connection between a stimulus and a particular kind of behavior, the response, which is linked with operant conditioning. Operant conditioning is given by Skinner, who who explained operant conditioning. Again, it's linked with the law of effect, but because the law of effect uh, this focus is law of effect focuses on the pleasurable effect and the unpleasurable effect. The operant conditioning focuses on reinforcement. So it is based on Thorndike law of effect, but it stressed on a new term. It is using a new term, reinforcement. So it's similar to law of effect, but just there is a new terminology being used, which is reinforcement. And again, then we can see the reinforcement being further divided into different terms. So behavior which is reinforced tends to be repeated. So any behavior which is frequently repeated, so again the that learning would be strengthened. And if the behavior is not reinforced, then that behavior would die out, or that behavior would extinguish, or the behavior would get weak. So while Thorndike used the puzzle box, so we have the Skinner box in operant conditioning. Skinner identified three types of operants, or three kind of responses, which are based on different kind of reinforcement. So the three types of operants, or the three types of responses that can be given by a learners are neutral operant or neutral response, reinforcers, and the third is punishers. So neutral operants are responses from the environment that neither increase nor decrease the probability of a behavior. So they are those particular kind of responses that has no effect, that can that neither increase nor decrease the probability of a behavior that is being repeated. In comparison, we have reinforcers. Reinforcers are those responses from the environment that strengthen the behavior, that makes the behavior to be repeated. So responses are something that gives strength to the behavior, that that gives more probability of repeating the behavior. So in a nutshell, we can say reinforcers strengthen the response. So it can be positive or negative. Punishers, in comparison to reinforcers, are those that discourage the response, that discourage the occurrence of a particular response, that weakens a particular response. So punishers has a capacity to weaken the behavior. So as we have seen that the reinforcers can be positive or negative, so then we have positive reinforcement and then we have negative reinforcement. Positive means adding something to the environment. So positive is something, some addition of something in the environment that can strengthen a behavior. For example, a reward. Adding a reward to the learning environment would strengthen the behavior. Negative means taking away or removing. So negative reinforcement is again something which is removed, which can strengthen the behavior, because reinforcement is is aimed at strengthening behavior. So both the cases we are strengthening the behavior, but in negative we are trying to strengthen the behavior by removing something from the environment, and that something which is removed is unpleasant. So while that unpleasant is removed from the environment, so the behavior is strengthened that we try to aim at. For example, eliminating distractors, eliminating different kind of noise, different kind of unpleasurable, unpleasant stimulus from the response would improve the learning behavior. Similarly, for punishers, again we have two kind of punishers. One is positive punishment and the second is negative punishment. Punishment aims at weakening the behavior. So positive punishment would be adding something to the environment to discourage undesired behavior, to weaken a particular behavior. And the negative means removing of something to discourage a particular behavior. So in negative, we are removing something which is pleasant, again to discourage a behavior which is not needed, which is not required. So we are trying to weaken a behavior by removing something which is pleasant. If I go with the example of positive punishment, which is the examples are scolding a child in front of a class. So you are basically adding scolding, you're adding abusing to a child in front of a class, and the purpose is to make the child give up the undesired behavior. For example, if the child is undisciplined or is problematic, so you're scolding, you're adding this punishment to the child to weaken his undesired behavior. Similarly, corporal punishment is again adding of the punishment to the learning environment to discourage the behavior which is not needed, which is the incapacity of the child to study, or the child poor study habits that you want to avoid. Similarly, if you want the student to quit a particular food, so you can add something unpleasant to it, so that when the student or the child would eat that particular food, so the bad taste would avoid the taking of the same food again. Negative punishment, as it is relates to removing something to discourage or weaken a behavior, so that's detention, which means that teacher is taking the independence or the freedom of the child. It's removing that particular break time from the student time, and because that leisurable time has been removed, therefore the student would in the future would not like that his pleasurable time is removed, and therefore the student would then start working. Similarly, while removing of food, when the parents or the teacher make the student stay in the break and not to go to the canteen for the food, or removing of other kind of perks or privileges from the students, or the pocket money, or keeping the child away from the video games, denying him to play on laptops or mobiles. So this is negative punishment, where these things, these pleasurable things, are removed from the student just to make him remove or weaken the unwanted behavior. Now the question is, which one is better? Are the reinforcement better or the punishment is better? The psychologists believe that the reinforcement are better. If we come to punishment, then positive punishment or negative punishment, again it's an issue, and it would depend upon the context or upon the particular level of response level of the student uh, that is linked with a particular stimulus. The teacher has to take good precaution, has to be very careful in deciding about the different kind of reinforcement or punishment, by studying the mental level or the response level of the student, and then go with a particular kind of reinforcement to make the desired learning behavior. So students, we are finally done with the behaviorism. Let us discuss some of the educational implications of behaviorism. So with regard to classical conditioning, sometimes the students link a neutral stimulus with a conditioned response. The Because there are so many things happening in the classes and in our education institutions. So somehow, while there are different kind of responses and different kind of stimulus being made at different times, so sometimes there is a particular neutral stimulus which is producing a response which is not needed, which we do not want. And this neutral stimulus uh, is linked, is conditioned with a particular conditioned response, and therefore, again, when that particular conditioned response is not there, the neutral stimulus is again creating the same conditioned response. So this relates to classical conditioning. So an example is the students' anxiety in the classroom. They are feeling depressed, fully stressed, and are in tension in the classroom. Why the student are feeling anxiety? Why are they depressed? Why this this anxiety response which is not needed, which we do not like? Why this is there? Why this conditioned response is there? Because it is linked with a particular neutral stimulus which is producing that response, and the teacher has to rightly identify that neutral stimulus which is resulting in this anxiety or depression in the classroom. The neutral stimulus can be that homework not done. If homework is not done by a student, this should not produce anxiety in the classroom. This should never depress the student or produce tension in the students. But because homework is not done and it is producing anxiety, the teacher has to identify why the students are behaving like this, why the homework, which is a neutral stimulus, is producing a particular response, and the teacher should then aim at removing this neutral stimulus so that the student anxiety is also removed and the student feel happy and relax in the class. Similarly, when the test is not prepared, again resulting in anxiety, or the student-teacher relationship is resulting in anxiety in the classroom, and the teacher has to aim at removing these kind of neutral stimulus to have satisfactory response from the student. The next is teacher should provide instructional cues to produce correct response. The teacher should give directions, should give guidelines to the student to give them and to take them towards correct responses, because these instructional cues are those particular kind of stimulus that we are trying to add to the environment to make the student learn a particular kind of behavior. The teacher can also do with practice paid with target stimuli. So the teacher should identify that particular stimuli, and then that stimuli should be given more and more with practice so that there is a connection between the stimulus and the response, and that behavior is strengthened. The teacher should also provide different kind of reinforcement for correct response. And in the reinforcement, the teacher can go with different options. He has positive reinforcement, he has negative reinforcement, he can go for positive punishment, he can go for negative punishment. Building fluency get responses closer and closer to correct response. So the teacher should try to produce that kind of stimulus, that kind of activities should be introduced so that the students get closer and closer to the particular response. And again, this can be made with different kind of reinforcement, or with different kind of effects, or with different kind of exercise, so that the student uh, try to achieve the exact response by more practice and more accuracy. Multiple opportunities should be provided in the class. For example, there should be enough time and practice with drills, repetitions, so that the law of exercises is put into practice and the student learn better. And with this, we come to the end of behaviorism. I hope you understand the concept. I wish you good luck. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.